Principia Theologica, Episode 2, What is Consciousness? Okay, so, welcome back. I'm Sol Soler, philosopher and theoretical physicist, and I've written the Principles of the Physics of Consciousness. And as I've presented them, and you can check out my presentation on this channel, many lectures stating, explaining and justifying the principles of the physics of consciousness and showing how to apply them. And as I've presented them, I am regularly met with the question, what is consciousness? What do you mean by consciousness? So in this brief lecture, I want to make that totally clear. Okay. And because our theological models will hinge on our understanding of consciousness, that's provided to us by the principles of the physics of consciousness. So you definitely need to get the principles quite clear in your mind, so that you can the more thoroughly and the more truly you understand the principles of the physics of consciousness, the more you'll be able to trust in the conception of God that we construct using them. So, what is consciousness? So in my theory, consciousness is physical energy. All the physical energy of our universe is conscious within itself. Okay, so let's compare that to the conventional understanding of consciousness. You and I are both, and everyone else, are physical entities, and we are also conscious entities. So we're physical and we're conscious. I like to say we're physico-conscious entities. So that means that we are made out of, and according to science, and remember we're trying to be rigorously scientific, so we at all times we want to go according to science, such that we can have scientific faith in God. According to science, we are made of nothing except for energy and particles, the basic energy and particles of our universe. So you are constructed, no matter which part of your body you examine, you will find energy, and you will find protons, neutrons, and electrons in different configurations. Make up atoms, make up molecules, make up cells. And you are also conscious. And if we look at the experiments of neuroscience, we see that our conscious state depends on the configuration of our physical state. Okay, so if we scan your brain, every change in your consciousness, every change in your conscious state will correspond to a change in the physical configuration of the particles and energy that make your body and your brain. Okay, so conventionally how scientists have treated this is, well, they're scientists, so they've studied scientists in university, and in university when you study physics, you study the energy and you study particles, the basic energy and particles of our universe, and consciousness doesn't figure anywhere. When you define an electron or a photon, consciousness doesn't come up at all. An electron is considered, in conventional physics, is considered well defined without any mention of consciousness whatsoever. So all scientists, until my theory, have been trying to understand consciousness by first assuming that the basic energy and particles of our universe are devoid of consciousness, that they are not conscious within themselves, which creates what's known as the hard problem of consciousness. How are we conscious if all the energy and particles that we're formed out of are not? And then they try and come up with ways that consciousness somehow emerges around configurations of non-conscious particles, and they totally fail to do this, and they've failed to do this for well over 100 years. And you can check their theories; they're not good. They don't make sense. So all of the scientific theories of consciousness, apart from mine, are based on the idea that the energy created in the Big Bang was and remains devoid of consciousness. Now, in my theory, the energy created in the Big Bang possessed consciousness within itself. So you are a physical entity. You're a physical object. And within you, you can check lie down on your bed and put your conscious attention anywhere. You can put it in your toes, your knees, your stomach. You can check if you're hungry. And then you can imagine things in your head. And you're conscious throughout yourself. You are a physical object made of physical energy, and you are conscious intrinsically within yourself. And I'm saying that all energy, all physical energy, and therefore all physical particles, because they're made out of this energy, are all conscious within themselves. And I've proven this by giving the first simple, logical, and intuitive interpretation of the experiments of quantum mechanics. So in the same way, scientists have never been able to make sense of consciousness, because they're assuming energy and particles are non-conscious, and then they can't come up with a way of explaining how consciousness then turns on. They also haven't been able to explain quantum mechanics, the experiments of quantum mechanics. But my postulate of intrinsic consciousness allows for the first simple, logical, and intuitive interpretation of quantum mechanics that puts my theory beyond all reasonable theoretical doubt. So, in my theory, all the energy created in the Big Bang was conscious right from the start. For something to exist, it has to have fundamental properties. If something has zero fundamental properties, it doesn't exist. And I'm just saying that among energy's fundamental properties when it's created, consciousness was one of those fundamental properties. And then this conscious energy has formed conscious particles out of itself. So all basic particles are conscious. They are conscious entities. Now let's be very clear. We do not mean to say that they're conscious in the complex and advanced way that a human is. No, they're exceedingly simple formations. So their consciousness is exceedingly simple. It's not like an electron is flying around going, "Way, I'm Sarah the electron." No reflexive sense of self. That's taken 14 billion years to evolve for humans to have self-awareness like we have. That requires exceedingly high levels of complexity that take many billions of years to evolve. When we're talking about an electron, we're talking about one of the simplest and earliest formations of conscious energy possible. So when we talk about an electron being conscious, what do we mean? We just mean that it has some conscious perception of its local universe. So for example, an electron in a magnetic field will have some conscious sensation of being in a magnetic field, because it's a magnetic entity. It has a magnetic dipole, or magnetic moment, I should say, sorry. Magnetic moment. So it will have some conscious sensation of being in the magnetic field within itself, just like you have conscious sensation of being in a gravitational field. Just like a plant has some sensation of being in a gravitational field, for example. So it will have some conscious sensation of its local environment, as well as the conscious ability to choose from limited sets of possible future states and actions. So the electron in the magnetic field can choose between aligning its spin, that's its magnetic moment, aligning its spin up or spin down with the field. Okay. So, as I've shown in my lecture called The Truth About Quantum Mechanics and Consciousness and quantum mechanics are twin mysteries. You solve one, you solve the other. And the key to solving both is that all energy is intrinsically conscious. And I've shown that we can use this postulate to interpret all quantum experiments, because in each quantum experiment isn't just a physical process, it's also a conscious process involving conscious entities, conscious electrons, conscious atoms, conscious molecules. So you check out that lecture if you want to familiarize yourself with this new interpretation. The more thoroughly you understand the principles of the physics of consciousness, the more truly you can believe in the picture of the universe that we can use to paint with those principles. Okay, so physical energy is conscious. Consciousness, all energy is conscious within itself, and this energy can take on different forms. And just like when you form energy and particles into different configurations, you get different physical properties, you also get different conscious properties within the forms. Or not conscious properties, different conscious states within the forms. So you can form particles and energy into a human or into your exact configuration, and you get your exact conscious state at any given time, or you can form it into a dog or a jellyfish or a star, and they have different conscious experiences within themselves. Okay, so I hope I made that clear, and it will become clearer and clearer as we use the principles. So all physical energy is physical consciousness. All energy is conscious within itself, but the conscious states depend on how the energy is configured, how the energy and particles are configured. So if you configure energy and particles into your fingertip, then you have the kind of conscious sensations you have in your fingertip when it's connected to your nervous system and to your brain, of course. It requires the connection to your nervous system and brain for you to have the conscious sensation within your fingertip. But then if you configure the particles, atoms and particles and atoms and molecules into your tongue, they'll have the conscious sensation of taste when it's connected to your central nervous system. Okay. But in my theory, all energy, all particles are conscious. They are physical consciousness, and it takes on different forms and has different conscious experiences depending on the form. Now, this does mean that things like a pen are conscious. But again, we have to be very clear and sober in our analysis of these things. That doesn't mean that there's any sort of pen consciousness, oh, I'm a pen. No, it just means that all the individual particles and atoms within your pen are all individual centers of consciousness. Okay? So, and they're just bound together, and all the quantum decisions that are being made, that are involved in being a pen. So when you have atoms and molecules arranged into a pen, they're always vibrating and they're emitting photons and absorbing photons. All of those quantum decisions are conscious choices made by the individual molecules and atoms in the pen. Okay, but they're very simple. Until now, it was thought that those decisions were just made probabilistically, just by chance. But no, all atoms and molecules are very, very, very simple conscious entities making simple conscious choices, such as absorb a photon at the exact moment to emit a photon, or to jump up or down an energy level. Okay, so you don't have to worry about, oh, my pen is, it has some conscious awareness of me or anything like that, or has some personality. No, not at all. It's far too simple a configuration of particles and energy. A human being is much different, and a human being has taken 14 billion years to evolve. And very importantly, a human being has a central nervous system. Okay? And the central nervous system is a piece of conscious technology that has taken billions of years to evolve. And what it does, as its name suggests, it has the ability of creating a center of consciousness within your central nervous system. And that's why you experience your conscious experience centrally in one singular, you have one singular conscious experience. That's created by your central nervous system. And I will show how to use the principles of the physics of consciousness to make models of the nervous system and human conscious experience. Okay. So yeah, you don't have to worry or be shocked that your pen is conscious. It just means the individual atoms and molecules are conscious, and they're exceedingly simple conscious states. An atom can just feel forces and accelerations and can make really simple choices between spin up, spin down, the exact moment to emit a photon, jumping up and down energy levels. Okay, it's the complexity of the human form that makes for our very complex human conscious experience. We have the most complexly configured brains on Earth, which is why we are the most intelligent creatures on the planet and have the most complex conscious lives. Okay. So, yeah, all energy is conscious, and it always has been. and the consciousness is within the forms. So like your configuration of energy and particles, all of those energy and particles are conscious. They can bind together, biochemically bind together into new forms, giving rise to new conscious experience. And you are one exceedingly complex configuration of conscious energy and particles. And your central nervous system takes conscious transmissions from all the different parts of your body and centralizes them into your central singular conscious experience, which is why you feel like one person. But you can use your central nervous system to consciously inspect, or consciously communicate with all the different parts of your body. So you can put your foot as conscious as well. It's not you. You are your center of consciousness, but you can connect consciously to your foot via your central nervous system, and you can share in the conscious experience of your foot. So you can lie down on your bed and put your consciousness, connect your center of consciousness via your central nervous system to all the different parts of your body, and check that you have conscious experience throughout your entire physical form, and it changes depending on which part of your body you put your conscious attention. Why? Because different forms give rise to different conscious experience. So you can put your conscious attention in your muscle and feel the conscious experience of your muscle at any time. Or you can put a sugar cube on your tongue and feel the conscious experience of your tongue as it interacts with the sugar cube, and you'll experience sweetness. Okay, so yeah, but everything is conscious. This means there's no simple definition of what consciousness is. And here there's an analogy to conventional physics, conventional normal physics. Like let's say someone asks you, what is a physical object? If someone just say, what is a physical object? You would just have to say a physical object is some formation of energy. All particles are made out of energy, and all physical objects in our universe are made out of particles and energy, and the particles are made out of energy themselves. So you'd have to say a physical object is just some formation of physical energy. You wouldn't be able to say anything else apart from that. If someone wanted a more precise definition, you'd have to say, well, what physical object are you talking about? And by that, you would mean, how are the physical energy and particles configured? Because if you take physical energy and particles and configure them one way, you get one object with particular physical properties. And if you configure them another way, you get different physical properties, a different object with different physical properties. So it depends on the configuration. And the properties change when the configuration changes. So let's give an example. You take carbon atoms, all the same carbon atoms, you arrange them into a particular pattern. So all the carbon atoms are conscious, by the way, individually within themselves. You arrange them into a particular pattern and you get the lead from a pencil. That's graphite. And it has particular physical properties. You arrange them into another configuration and you get a diamond. And you can use you're using exactly the same carbon atoms, but you've got radically different physical properties. You've got the physical properties of pencil lead, which is very soft. Pencil lead is in layers called laminas, and when you write on a page, you leave a layer of the pencil lead on the page. That's how a pencil works. It's why it gets shorter as you write, because you're leaving layers of graphite on the page. You can't do that with a diamond. It's far too hard. You can't leave layers of it on a page. It's way, way too hard. It's the hardest substance known to man. But it's made of the same carbon atoms, so it depends. And the properties depend on how they are configured and what pattern they are arranged. And it's the same with consciousness. So if someone says, what is consciousness? I say consciousness is physical energy. All physical energy is conscious within itself. Physical energy is physical consciousness. Then, if you want more information, it depends on how the physical energy is configured. If it's configured into a human, it has human conscious experiences. If it's configured into an eye connected to a brain, an eye and an optic nerve connected to a functioning occipital lobe and a functioning brain with a functioning central nervous system giving rise to a center of consciousness, then the conscious experience is that of visual eyesight. If it's arranged into an ear, it's auditory conscious experience. If it's arranged into a plant, then it's the conscious experience of a plant. Now, that's somewhat mysterious because we're very different configurations, so we don't know exactly what it's like to be a plant, but some things are obvious. They like sunlight, so they don't like cold. They strive to be in the sunlight, so we can imagine them finding the sensation of sunlight on their leaves pleasant, for example. But their conscious experience is very different because they're a different configuration. So there are many different possible types of consciousness, many different possible states of consciousness. There's the human state of consciousness, which or not the human state, the many millions of different possible human states of consciousness. You know, hunger, happiness, laughing, joy. You know a lot of the human states of conscious states. But they're not the only conscious states. Then there are the conscious states of fish, and the conscious states of dogs, and the conscious states of plants, and the conscious states of electrons, and the conscious states of stars, etc., etc. And they're all very different. And we use the principles of the physics of consciousness to systematically deduce the conscious states of different physical forms. Okay, so there is one simple answer to what is consciousness. Consciousness is physical energy, but then the conscious state experienced by the physical energy depends on how the energy and particles are configured. But one thing you do know for sure, and this is key to the definition of consciousness: when particles and energy are configured into exactly your physical configuration, so right now, they give rise to exactly your conscious experience at that same time. Okay? So that's key to the definition of consciousness. Or because consciousness is private, you can only experience your own consciousness. Your definition of consciousness has to refer to your own experience of consciousness. This is something that has been a great obstacle to the scientific development of physics of consciousness, because scientists have wanted to give a purely objective definition of consciousness when it's not a purely objective phenomenon. So all our understanding of consciousness because consciousness is private, the only consciousness you've ever experienced is your own, all our individual definitions of consciousness must refer back to our own experience of consciousness. Okay, let's give a brief statement of the principles of the physics of consciousness. So the first principle is E equals C. Capital E equals capital C. That is, physical energy is consciousness. Okay? It can take on many different forms. Particles, atoms, molecules, cells, all the way up to humans, and jellyfish and dogs, etc. But all energy is conscious within itself and is capable of many different conscious states depending on configuration. Principle 2, the principle of similar forms. Let's do the law of privacy first. Conscious states are private to the entity that experiences them. So your consciousness is private to and within your physical form. And you can check this for yourself. The great thing about my theory is it makes sense of your actual experience of consciousness. Check within yourself. Your conscious experience is within yourself. It's intrinsic to your physical form, within your physical form. And that means I can't see it. I can't see your conscious experience. I only ever see your outer shell. If I look at your brain, I only ever see the objective manifestation of neurons and things like that. I can't see what you're thinking about. That's why neuroscientists have to ask the patient, what was your conscious experience during that experiment? So neuroscientists do experiments, they change the configuration of the brain, but then they ask the patient, so what happened? What did you feel? What did you see? Because consciousness, the subjective aspects of consciousness cannot be directly observed. That's the law of privacy, I call it. The law of privacy. Now, I must give credit where credit's due. Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher, implicitly stated the law of privacy. He didn't state it explicitly like I have done, but he implicitly stated it in the 1700s and deserves credit for it. He noticed that as much as we study an object, we can't know what it's feeling within itself. Okay, and that's been the major obstacle to a science of consciousness. You need to get that very clear in your head, that the only consciousness you've ever experienced is your own. So all your understanding and knowledge of consciousness must be grounded in your own experience of consciousness. If you weren't conscious yourself, You could never know what consciousness is, and you couldn't even ask the question, what is consciousness? Okay. So, and if you want to understand my principles and want to understand my models of God and things like that, you need to start paying a lot of attention to your conscious experience, meditating and watching, paying attention to your consciousness throughout your body and how your mind works and things like that. Meditation, basically. Okay, that's the law of privacy. Principle 3 is the principle of similar forms. This is very useful when we systematically deduce the conscious states of other entities. So this principle states that similar configurations of conscious energy and particles experience within themselves similar conscious states. Different configurations experience different conscious states. So this is obvious. Again, my theory aligns with our everyday experience of being conscious. You're a human, so I'll assume that you're a normal, what we think of as a normal human. No offense if you're not, but I'll assume that you have 2 eyes, for example. So do I, and our eyes will be similar. All human eyes follow the same plan in terms of how they work, and then they're connected to the retina, the rods and the cones, connected to the optic nerve, connected to the occipital lobe in the brain, and all these similar configurations give rise to similar conscious experience. That's why you can look at a tree and say, oh, look at the green tree, the green and brown tree, and then you say, soul, look at the tree, and I will see it as well, and we know that we're having the same, not exactly the same, but this very similar visual conscious experience of the tree, because we are similarly configured. Then you could be colorblind, for example, and then you'd have a different conscious visual experience of the tree. But we could look at the structure of your eyes and see, oh, your rods and cones are different, and that's why you're colorblind. So again, we're linking, what my theory does is link objective physics with subjective experience, which is the key to the physics of consciousness. Okay, and then a jellyfish is a radically different configuration of conscious energy and particles, so its conscious experience is much different to ours. Or your dog is quite similar but quite different as well. So your dog has eyes and a stomach, so your dog feels hungry in its stomach the same way you consciously feel hungry in your stomach. It has 2 eyes, so it has binocular vision, like you have binocular vision, but then its brain is much smaller, no linguistic centers, so your dog's conscious life is a bit of a mystery to you as well, because you're different forms. You can't communicate as well. Humans can communicate and understand each other because we're very similar configurations of conscious energy. So we have similar conscious experiences within ourselves. That's the principle of similar forms. Yeah, very important in making theoretical models of conscious systems. Then there's localism. This is very important in physics. It's a bit of a technical principle. It's very important for conscious interpretations of conventional physics. Localism just means that consciousness is a local phenomenon. And that just means that nearby things affect your conscious state more than far away things. Okay, so you have conscious experience of the stars, but one star is much, much closer to you. And that star, of course, is the sun, and it dominates your conscious experience of stars. The whole reason why it's bright in the day is purely because of the sun, which is the nearest star. At night, you can see them much further away stars, but they have much less of an effect on your conscious experience. Also, the gravitational field of the sun is what's keeping the Earth spinning around it. And we spin around our particular star because it's closest to us. So we're trapped in its gravitational field. Then this, for example, as well, you have conscious experience of the gravitational field of the Earth, and that dominates your conscious experience of gravity because you're nearby the Earth. You have conscious perception of your universe, but you only have conscious perception of your local universe. You can see the universe nearby. You can't, when you look around yourself, you see nearby things. So you have conscious experience of local. Consciousness is local. You have conscious experience of things local to you, nearby you. You can see the universe, but not all of it. So you can't see the distant, furthest regions of the universe. They're too far away, so they don't affect your consciousness. What's the next principle? Next principle is the conscious interpretation of quantum mechanics. And this is the linchpin to all my physics, really. It's the strongest piece of theoretical evidence to my theory. I also have testable hypotheses, experiments that we can carry out once my theory breaks into the zeitgeist. And in this interpretation of quantum mechanics, all quantum entities, all particles, all photons are individual centers of consciousness. They have some limited perception of their local surrounding universe, and they have the conscious ability of selecting from limited sets of future possibilities. So, to repeat, an electron in a magnetic field has some conscious sensation of being in a magnetic field, just like you have conscious sensation of being in a gravitational field, for example. And then it makes the conscious choice to align its magnetic moment, either spin up or spin down with the field. Okay, so those are the well-defined scientific principles of the physics of consciousness, and they're analogous to Newton's principles, laws and principles of motion, which can be used to analyze macroscopic dynamics. And similarly, my principles can be used to analyze and model different conscious systems, such as all the experiments of quantum mechanics, or the conscious experience of humans and their central nervous system, or to make a scientific model of the conscious entity known as God, and things like that. Okay, so that's it. That is what consciousness is. It is energy. All energy is conscious within itself. It takes on different forms, and different forms have different conscious experiences within themselves. The only conscious experiences you can directly observe are your own. So all our understanding of consciousness has to begin with our human experience of consciousness and work out from there. Which makes sense because our whole understanding of the universe begins with our understanding of ourselves and our world. That's why science began with an understanding of the Earth and moves out from there to the further reaches of the universe. Okay, so consciousness is energy. Energy is conscious. That's what consciousness is. Okay, so thanks for listening. Check out the next lecture, Lecture 3, A New Picture, A New Hope. Okay, all the best.